Hello, and welcome back to the God the Artist podcast. I'm your host, Morgan McCarver, and today we have very special guest, Terry Whalin. I'm going to read a little bit about him. He is quite an accomplished author and editor. Terry Whalin understands both sides of the editorial desk as an editor and a writer. He worked as a magazine editor, and his magazine work has appeared in more than 50 publications. A former book acquisitions editor for several publishers and a former literary agent, Terry is an acquisitions editor at Morgan James Publishing. He has written more than 60 books through traditional publishers in a wide range of topics, from children's books to biographies to co-authored books. Over 20 years ago, in 11 days, Terry wrote a diet book called First Place by Carol Lewis, which has sold over 100,000 copies. Terry's newest book is 10 Publishing Myths, Insights Every Author Needs to Succeed by Morgan James Publishing. Tonight, everyone can get a physical copy of 10 Publishing Myths for only $10, including the shipping, plus it comes with over $200 worth of free bonuses. You can get this special offer at publishingoffer.com, and I'll put that link in the show notes as well. Terry is a popular speaker and teacher at numerous writers' conferences and an active member of the American Society of Journalists and Authors. Terry and his wife, Christine, live in Southern California. Terry, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Morgan, wonderful to be here with you today.
I think I'm probably most excited about getting to talk to you since you helped me get my book published. And you can confirm that Morgan James Publishing is not a company that I made up, as Morgan is self-publishing. That is the question I get the most.
No, David Hancock named the company after his two children. So you had nothing to do with it, and I had nothing to do with it.
There you go, folks. That is the proof right there. Well, you have written so many books over so many different types of genres. What is your favorite genre, or how do you navigate between different genres like that?
Oh, I don't know that I really have a favorite. It's almost like trying to ask me which is my favorite child, in a sense, because we pour a lot of work into each of these books. I guess I've written a lot of biographies because as a kid, I read a lot of biographies. And so I love those stories that other people have. That's why I've written those books. After a while, I realized that, there's a limited number of books that I personally can write out of my own story background, but there's an infinite number from other people. And so I started pairing up with other people and writing their books. And I learned a lot from that experience as well. I guess one of the books that I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity would be my first one. That it's a little children's book that I did that came out in 1992. It was a little children's book called "When I Grow Up, I Can Go Anywhere for Jesus," and it really started out. I was at a writers' conference, which I always recommend people go to these conferences because you meet editors and people that are in the book publishing business. And I was talking with a children's editor, and she said, "Terry, I have a problem." And so I always listen when these editors tell me their problems. And she said, "I've got all these books at David C. Cook, and we're charged as a publisher to try to teach our children about the world and how it's a big world out there. I don't have a single book that talks about that issue. What kind of ideas do you have?" Now, at that time, my kids were little, and I was working at Wycliffe Bible Translators. And so she knew about me. And so I was starting to write for magazines, but didn't have a book published. But I was reading lots of books. And I knew that Stephen Lawhead, who writes fantasy, had a set of children's books that he'd done under the name Steve Lawhead that had real pictures combined with a little cartoon character. And so I looked at that editor and I said, "Hey, why don't we take our real pictures of Wycliffe around the world, combine them with a little cartoon character, and show kids that they can go anywhere in the world?" She looked at me and she said, "Oh, that's a really good idea, Terry. Write that up and send that to me. So I made a little note and I went home and I wrote it up and sent it to her. Now, we went back and forth a lot. I mean, it's really hard to write a little children's book. So there was a lot of work that went into this book, but that ultimately became my first book. And Morgan, what I know from going to these writers' conferences now and talking to a lot of writers, I'll listen to their ideas and I'll say, that's a really good idea. Write that up and send that to me. Well, what I know from going to these events, even though I follow up and I try to help people, know that I really do want their stuff, maybe 10, 20% of those people will actually send me their stuff at the end of the day. So I don't know what happens to them, whether they get some crisis at home or they get scared or what their reason is. But what I've learned out of that, it's not that I've had, not that I'm the best writer in the room or anything like that, but I am one of the most persistent and consistent people that you'll meet. So when somebody gives me an opportunity to say, send it to them, I'm going to make a little note and I'm going to send it to them just to see if that door opens. I mean, that's basically what you're doing in the stuff.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Even definitely when I was trying to get my book published and just in the ceramics world too, like, yes, I think skill and talent has a huge play in that, but I would say 50% of the battle is just actually applying or actually sending something off.
It's not easy. I mean, we all get rejected. I get rejected all the time, but it's part of the process and it's not personal. You're just looking for the right opportunity at the end of the day.
Exactly. Yeah. The key for me is to apply to enough things that the rejections aren't as painful because I've applied to so many things I can't do them all anyway. I've just gotta
Absolutely.
move on.
Absolutely.
So your new book that's out, 10 Publishing Myths, that would have been something that I would have just lapped right up as a new author. Can you talk a little bit about how this book came to be, well, first an idea and then turned into a book?
Yeah, I wrote 10 Publishing Myths because I talk to authors all the time and I see that often they have really unrealistic expectations about what's going to happen with their book. Because what I've learned from being in publishing for a long time is that so much of the process is outside of our control. So I can't make a reader go to the bookstore and buy your book. For example, I just can't do that as the author. I can tell people about your book and I can do my part to be telling people about the book. But that's one of the things that I've kind of learned the hard way here, that every author has to take their responsibility and make that effort to reach readers and be telling people about their book.
I think that's super powerful. There was one, let's see, I'm gonna just use your book as reference right now. So, chapter 5, I thought this one stuck with me. Um, Myth number 5, I can't call myself a writer unless I publish a book. I think a lot of people are there.
Yeah, and I do understand that, but I think all of us who have written anything, whether you've written a journal or whether you write online or whether you have a blog, all of us are writers. And so the key is to find the right place for your writing out there in the marketplace. And so I started writing for magazines and I've been a magazine editor. Many people neglect writing for magazines. They think, oh, print magazines aren't active anymore. They're going away. It's only online. Well, that's not true. I mean, Men's Health magazine has a circulation of 21 million copies every issue. And so, it all depends on the publication and what are you trying to write and what are you trying to get it out there? I mean, a lot of people in the Christian market like to write devotions, for example, and there's a little devotional that you can get at many churches called the Upper Room. What people don't realize about that devotion is their circulation is 6 million copies. And so, and it's like 300 words. So, they have a pattern. And so study the pattern, read the guidelines, send in your stuff. I mean, it's not easy, but you do have to take action in order to do that and get your work out there.
Did you become a writer, or when did you first realize that this was a talent that God had given you?
Oh, I think it was in high school somewhere or another. My English teacher noticed something in me and encouraged me to join the high school newspaper, which I did. They put me writing sports. Now I'm kind of a non-sports person. I don't watch a lot of sports. I don't know a lot about sports, and so in order to be able to write that stuff, I had to learn all kinds of terms and everything in order to be able to do that. But it was a great experience for me. And by the end of my high school, I was the editor of the high school newspaper. I trooped off to Indiana University. That's what I thought I was going to do. Is I studied journalism there. It's one of the top journalism schools in the country. I joined the college newspaper, and I really thought I was a big writer, to do that. Well, they had me rewrite my first story about 5 times. And when it finally appeared, I think it was like 3 paragraphs. It didn't even have my name on it. And so I learned that very quickly that I had a lot to learn while I was there. And, it was a great experience, doing that newspaper and learning from all that.
It's amazing, especially you're in a new pond, you've got to learn new tricks and rewriting it 5 times. That's got to take patience.
Yeah, we a lot of times back then we would at least me, I would blow off my classes and write stories because that's what we were doing. We were really writing stories back then. And so uh, it was in my halfway through my sophomore year. I was sitting at we were this is in the pre-computer days, so we were sitting at old Royal typewriters, and I couldn't get my fingers on the right keys, and I kept muttering to myself, "Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ." And this little blonde-haired girl that was sitting next to me, she said, "Oh, Terry, don't say that, because one of these days when you really need him, you'll call out for him and he won't be there." And I
Hmm.
thought, what's that? I'm a Christian. I go to church when I'm at home. I read the Bible in church when I'm at home. I had no relationship, Morgan. So she encouraged me to go to this little bookstore a couple blocks off the Indiana campus. They had pretty cards and posters, and maybe I'd find a book that interested me. So I wandered down there a couple of days later and I bought this book called Jesus the Revolutionary. I thought, how in the world could Jesus be a revolutionary? So I took that book back to my room and I read that book. It showed me a different side of Jesus than I'd ever seen before. About that time, somebody invited me to this Jesus people gathering in downtown Bloomington. They were sitting on little scraps of carpets with little candles lit. Those people in that room had something that I didn't have. And so I changed the direction of my life. My journalism colleagues thought I was nuts. So instead of becoming a newspaper reporter, which is what I thought I was going to do, like at the Indianapolis Star, the Chicago Tribune, I joined Wycliffe Bible Translators. And I spent 17 years with those guys. Uh, I have a New Testament on my shelf from the Southwest Quechua language in Guatemala, which wouldn't have existed if I hadn't made those kind of choices. But it took me in a different direction.
It's amazing. So you were helping to translate into different languages, or what was your role there?
I was doing a lot of the initial work in the Southwest Quechua language, which is a Mayan language in Guatemala.
Okay. Yeah, that's a language I've never even heard of. Is it similar to Spanish or?
Very different than Spanish. But I mean, they speak some Spanish there, but their heart language really is Cachiquel there.
So I'm guessing you just didn't happen to know Ketchikel. You had to learn it.
No, had to learn it word by word, and then create the alphabet and the writing materials. And we trained a lot of the initial translators that did finish the New Testament. We were only there a couple of years, but uh, the Nationals finished the translation. So yeah,
Amazing. Such important work too.
it is.
How did that affect the rest of your writing career?
Well, I wandered back to my writing while I was with Wycliffe, and so that's when I started writing for magazines, and that's when I got When I Grow Up published, and then I started writing books, and it was at that point that I was at the I was on the board of the Evangelical Press Association, and I met Roger Palms, who was the editor at Decision Magazine with Billy Graham. And so he called me one day. He said, Terry, I need an associate editor. Do you have any idea who could do that job? And I said, well, how about me? And so I flew to the Portland Crusade where Mr. Graham spoke, and I interviewed with Roger there. Then I flew to Minneapolis where the office was, and ultimately I became the associate editor at Decision Magazine. We were doing 1.8 million copies of the magazine every issue, so it was quite an experience. But the bottom line here, I didn't have the best relationship with Roger Palms, so I didn't end up staying in that position for a long time. But I sure learned a lot from that experience, and that when I left there, that's really what exploded my writing life, and I started writing for books and all kinds of things out of that.
So did you go off on your own at that point, or were you still
I
like,
did. I did. I launched a little freelance business that I was doing, and I started writing for all the different publishers that I've worked for through the years, and then um, I had the opportunity to work as an acquisitions editor. I knew that I was working at Christianity.com out in Northern California. I was one of the last 49 employees of the company that when they were closing the company, they blew through about $200 million in a little less than 2 years in the whole .com thing that happened. And I'd been out to different publishers pitching Christianity.com. And I knew that David C. Cook was looking for an acquisitions editor, even though I'd never worked on the inside of a publishing company before. And so I applied there, and they took me as their acquisitions editor. So it was very interesting for me to work on the inside of a publishing company and actually see how do they make their decisions? How do they decide which books to publish, which ones to leave, all that kind of stuff. And out of my own frustration about that experience, I wrote this book called Book Proposals That Sell 21 Secrets to Speed Your Success. And this is the revised edition of this book. And people can get this book if you go to bookproposals.ws, bookproposals.ws for website, you can get the whole book from me and people have used this book to get an advance, find a publisher, find a literary agent. It has over 150 five-star reviews. So it's helped a lot of people out there. So I'm really glad I had the opportunity to do that book too.
yeah. So did that come out of the good things that happened there, or the things that you wished were different?
It came out of the good things that I experienced there, but also just I'd be sitting in these publication meetings, and often I didn't have the ammunition from the writer that I needed to get them a book contract. And so I wrote the book out of my own frustration, trying to get better submissions. And I think that's happened. I mean, people have been able to make better submissions because of because of my book, but that's it came out of that whole experience.
I mean, you can only do your job so well if you don't have the information.
That's right. That's right. I've been in these meetings where we have a whole whiteboard full of titles, and the marketing department, sales, editorial, they're all there in the room. The one person that's missing from that meeting is the author. They're not there. And so I thought that's a tragedy, when that happens, because you as the author have the insight, what is the best title for your book. But on the traditional side, they often don't even ask you for your additional information there.
So, what is your opinion on traditional publishing versus publishing it yourself?
Well, there's really three paths to publish your book. There's traditional, which is uh, getting harder and harder. I guess I would say these days they want uh, they're looking for people that have big connections to readers that can easily sell books and all that kind of stuff. So it's even for the agents to sell the book, it's getting harder and harder for them to be able to find those connections. Uh, Publishing it yourself, that's the other option. But I mean, the average self-published book sells 100 to 200 copies throughout the lifetime of the book. You do it all yourself. You're all on your own. Your book's on Amazon. That's it. The third option is where Morgan James comes in as an independent hybrid publisher. Uh, I mean, we had one of our books recently on the USA Today bestseller list. So we're selling books inside the brick and mortar stores as well as the online stores. It's a whole different model that I spend a lot of time, like I did with you, to explain how that all works. But I think there are those three options, and I encourage people to explore all the options. Try to figure out what's the best one for you in this process.
Great advice. Everyone has a different style, and even if you can't get one of those traditional publishers, self-publishing sometimes works, and sometimes, like you said, you're all by yourself. I'm very thankful for Morgan James. I don't think I could have done it all by myself.
It is hard. It is hard, and I've signed a couple of authors recently that had literary agents who shopped their book all over the place, and for whatever reason, they didn't find the right connection. So they came to Morgan James, and we got their book, and we're moving it forward. Yeah.
How do you choose between the books? Because everybody's book is their baby, right? How do you choose which one to accept and which heart to break, so to speak?
It's really hard. We're looking for the right author. David Hancock always talks about how it's the majority of the process is the right author, because if we can't work with an author that's teachable, wanting to really learn about and get out there and sell their book at the end of the day, then that's where the rubber really meets the road, to have those kind of people. So we're looking for the right author, but we're also looking for the right book, that's going to be a readable book, have a high quality storytelling, all that, and it's going to make the right sense. So it's definitely a process in the to find those right people.
And then you're also a speaker and teacher as well. Is that correct?
I do. I get out not very often anymore, but I love to teach at writers' conferences and help people and all that kind of thing.
Is that like, are you teaching some of the things that are in your 10 Publishing Myths book, or is it
I
different?
have I have at different events. Yeah, I teach at writers' conferences, and it's really great to have that experience to talk with people one on one and see if what the right fit is and the right path for them. I love doing that kind of thing.
That's cool. I'm guessing that's like all over the country as well.
Yeah, they're all over the place. I've even been to Canada, to teach writers conferences up there. So it just all depends on the event and how we work it out.
Like a whole other level, because a lot of authors are introverts and they don't want to show their face. And so you're able to kind of wear many hats in that way.
Well, I put myself in the introvert category too, believe it or not. We're all introverts in a lot of ways, but we have to figure out how to rise to the occasion and get out there if we need to get out there. Is the way I look at it.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. You got to do what you got to do. Are there any tricks that you have for public speaking?
Oh, I don't know that I have any real tricks. I work really hard at what my content is going to be, and then I always have a handout in that process. I've seen many laptop PowerPoint presentations fail when people do that, and they spend the whole hour trying to get their equipment to work. So I never do that, but instead I have a handout which is reliable, and people can do that. And on my handout, I usually link to other resources that are way outside of what I'm actually teaching about. So it's really tries to make it. I try to make it a very valuable document for people to take home with them.
And I'm definitely a visual learner, so being able to take notes or have that handout, that's incredibly important. What would you say your faith, does that come into every book? What would you say about how your faith has kind of shaped your writing?
I guess my faith has shaped my writing in that, I pray about these books, and I'm really looking for the right opportunity and the open door at the end of the day. I've realized through the years, Morgan, that uh, I can only do my part in that process. So I just try to faithfully execute that part over and over.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important. Like everyone isn't a missionary, but we can serve God in a different mission field that doesn't always look like a mission field.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely right.
When would you say you felt like you made it as an author?
Oh, I don't know that I've ever really made it in a sense. I know my books are out there. My wake up moment that I'll tell you about is I in 2007, Mark Victor Hansen, the co-author on Chicken Soup for the Soul, invited me to uh, Los Angeles. He was having this mega book marketing university, it was called, and I was the literary agent at that time. I had a little agency in Arizona, so I flew out to Los Angeles for this. At that point in my life, I'd written about 50 books for traditional publishers. So they were paying me advances, they were making pretty books, they were putting them in the bookstore, all that kind of thing. But when you write for traditional publishers, quarterly or maybe once a year, they will send you a statement about how your books are selling. Well, all of mine back then were in the minus category. I wasn't making any money. And so I knew I must be doing something wrong. I just didn't know what I was doing wrong. And so when I was at Mega Book Marketing University, I decided to sit there with the 400 other people that were there and listen to the different speakers and see if I could figure out what I was doing wrong. Well, about halfway through the conference, it was almost like I'd been asleep and I woke up because one of the speakers was Jack Canfield, the other co-author on Chicken Soup for the Soul. And Jack has this book that I have on my shelf here called The Success Principles. He studied what does it take to be successful? And the very first success principle says that I will take 100% responsibility for my own success. Now, none of us want to take 100% responsibility. We want somebody else to do it. We want some editor, publisher, marketing person, please, somebody other than us. But I realized how little I was doing to be telling people about my own book. Sure, I had a terrywhalin.com website, but I wasn't doing anything else to be telling people about my book. So I decided back then to take 100% responsibility for my own success. So blogging was new back then, and I started blogging. Uh, I've been blogging persistently and consistently, Morgan, every week since 2004. Now, um, now they say I found an article about a year ago that says there's over 600 million blogs that are out there, and but they listed in this article the top 27 content producers. I was one of those 27, and it's not that I'm doing anything magical here. I'm just blogging once a week about the writing life, and people read this stuff, and so I think that persistence and consistency is something that every writer can do, and that really is going to pay off for you in the long run if you do that.
I think a lot of people think, oh, well, blogging, they're getting it for free. If I only put it in a book, then I can charge them for the book. How would you respond to something like that?
Well, I think you can look at your blog as as a way to get your content out there, but then you can take that content and then use that content for a book if you want to. That's how I wrote my Jumpstart Your Publishing Dreams book that I did, because I took all those blog posts and I reorganized them into a series of chapters, and So we in the business we call that a blook, is what that is. BLOK, because it originally came from my blog. I self-published that book, but now that book, the updated edition, is a book that Morgan James has, Jumpstart Your Publishing Dreams. And so I wanted it to look exactly like a book that Simon & Schuster or Random House or any of those places would have published. So I did that. I got Mark Victor Hansen to write the foreword for the book. I got endorsements. I worked with a cover designer, so the cover, everything just looks exactly like a book you'd find in the bookstore. So that's some of the keys I think that people forget. If they're going to self-publish your book, make sure your book looks like every other book that's out there in the bookstore at the end of the day.
That's important advice. And I think your book, your most recent book, The 10 Publishing Myths, you guys did a great job. The cover is beautiful. You organized it so well. I think that's what I noticed the most. Like your chapter headings have a little picture, and then the marketing is just incredible with matching business cards and everything really flows together. How did you come about having such a successful marketing program?
You know, I've really learned as I've worked on books that like I was saying earlier, that so much of the publishing process is outside of our control. So what I tried to do in 10 Publishing Myths was give people practical information of things that every author could do, whether you're traditionally published or self-published or independent published, whatever you're going to do. So, for example, I'll talk to authors and they'll say, well, my audience is over on Facebook. And so they spend a lot of energy on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is. Well, I don't own Facebook. They don't own Facebook. I mean, I could knowingly or unknowingly violate those terms and get kicked off of that place tomorrow. So you don't want to build your stuff over there. You want to be there and participate, but you also want to realize that you're like a guest there. It's a rented platform. You want to build your stuff on your own website, your own blog, your own newsletter, things that you can actually control. So that's why every chapter of 10 Publishing Myths, at the end, I have what I call a myth buster action, where people can actually take action for their own writing in the book. It's part of the way I organized it.
I think that's perfect. You read something and then you apply it. That's the best way to learn.
I think so. I think so. And when I put together the endorsements for this book, Alice Kreider, who was an acquisitions editor, David C. Cook. She's no longer there, but when she sent her endorsement to me, she said, Terry, you're missing the 11th myth. I'm like, oh, really? Okay, I'll bite, Alice. What was the 11th myth? She said, well, the 11th myth should be that if I send my book to Oprah Winfrey, she'll book me on her show. And I laughed. But then I thought, I think I should write that chapter because that really is a good myth. And so I wrote that chapter. And when we designed the book, I give that chapter away. So if people go to terrylinks.com /11th myth, 11th myth, you can get that chapter from me for free. And people don't realize, I mean, Oprah Winfrey has a huge warehouse in Chicago that she organizes all the stuff that people give her. And then she gives it away a couple times a year. Well, do you want your book to be in that giveaway? And that's what you're doing if you try to get your book to her. I think there's a lot more productive things that you can do with your book instead of sending your book to Oprah at the end of the day.
Yeah. What are some of those productive things that you would suggest instead of sending that book away?
Well, there's all kinds of practical things. My friend John Kramer, for example, has a book called 101 Ways to Market Your Book. I mean, there's lots and lots of different ways that you can do it, and so that's part of the challenge with the whole book business is there's not like a 1, 2, 3 formula that all of us follow to make our book successful. No, each of us have to experiment, see if it works. If it does work, keep going. If it doesn't work, try something else. I mean, that's pretty much the path that we're on here. But the author has to take the action in order to be able to get there.
Have you experienced any pushback as a Christian author or any kind of spiritual warfare because of publishing certain books?
Not so much that I can think of off the top of my head. I know every book has its own challenges. You could call that spiritual warfare to try to get those books done, but I think the process is complicated, and every time there's often some bump or something in the process to get it done. But we as Christians have a great resource, of the Lord to help us to be able to keep moving and keep moving forward.
What would you say the hardest part about writing a book and getting published would be?
I think the hardest part is just trying to find the right place, the right fit at the end of the day. We get rejected a lot as a writer. I know from being in some of the top literary agencies and publishers in this country in New York City that even though you get rejection letters from these people, or maybe you get ghosted, maybe they don't respond to you at all. What I know from talking to these people one on one is that every one of them is actively looking for the diamond in the rough, the next best-selling book. We're reading our mail, we're reading our email, we're trying to find that out there. So I really want people to be encouraged that that's a world of possibility out there. You just have to be out there in it and be sending your stuff and looking for that right connection.
Would you say the best way to find your niche of readers would be?
One of the best ways I think is in the magazine area. Again, like we were talking about earlier, I think those magazine articles are shorter than books. Books are long. I mean, 50,000 words is a long book, and so magazine articles are shorter. So for 500 words or 1,200 words, you can test your audience and get it out there in the magazines. And it's all a matter of how you look at your material, Morgan. If you write on a particular topic and related topics, if you piece those together, they can be chapters of your book. It's just all a matter of how you look at the material. But with magazines, it's very easy to reach 100,000, 200,000 people with your articles, and it's great advertisement for your book at the end to say Terry Whalin, author of 10 Publishing Myths.
That's a great point. You can always slip that in there and plug your book in the process.
Absolutely.
How do you know, since you've been doing this so long and you've been on both sides of the table, like you've said, as an editor and an author, do you just know, like, oh, this is going to be my book that sells 100,000 copies?
Oh, I don't think any of us really know. All you can do is all you can do at the end of the day is do your part, whatever that is. Um, I go back to the Chicken Soup for the Soul guys again that I met. They were rejected over 140 times before they finally found their publisher. They found a little publisher in Florida that would publish their book, the first Chicken Soup for the Soul book. They told their publisher they were going to sell 1 million books in the first year. Their publisher laughed at them. They never sold 1 million copies of anything. They thought that was a ridiculous idea. It took them a year and a half, Morgan, to sell their first 1 million books. These guys practice, though, what they call the rule of five. They got up every day and they did 5 things to be telling people about their book. They did a podcast, a radio show, a live event, a newspaper article, a guest blog. I mean, there's dozens of things you can do, but they did those things over and over and over. And that's what kicked off the momentum that ultimately became one of the best-selling series in the English language, Chicken Soup for the Soul. I mean, most authors will never put that kind of effort into it, but they should if they really believe in their book, if they're really passionate about it. That's that's where you can get some mileage going for your book.
Doing 5 things. So 5 things to promote your book every single day. That's what you're saying.
That's what they did. Yes.
Wow. Oh my goodness. That is a whole new level of commitment that I have not even tapped into.
No, it makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to sell your book. I mean, my free bonuses that I have with this book, if people go to publishingoffer.com, like you read, they're not just funky bonuses. I mean, one of the bonuses, for example, is an audiobook of a guy that I interviewed that self-published his book, but he sold thousands of copies of his book to public libraries. People don't think about libraries. I mean, libraries have budgets to buy books, right? So this guy talked about how he would get a list of libraries, call the particular librarian. He told who the librarian was, pitch his book, and libraries sometimes they have branches. So maybe that librarian could buy 10 copies of his book, one for each branch or something. He would take that order, write up an invoice, pack up his books, mail them to the library. And he sold thousands of books doing that. I mean, there's over 9,000 public libraries in this country. So there's opportunity. It's just a choice whether you're going to seize the opportunity and do something about that or not. It does take work. It's not just going to happen. You've got to do something.
Would you say it's easier the more books you write to be able to say, oh, well, if you like this, I also wrote that? Or does it make it trickier because now you've got to promote 2 books?
I think it's a bit trickier. You have to figure out which book you're really going to emphasize. So for example, even though I've written a lot of books, this 10 Publishing Myths is really the book that I've emphasized and worked on. That's why I created that publishing offer website and all that kind of thing.
That website is a great idea. And are you able to maintain that and keep that? I saw your blog on there. So do you post from the website for your blog, or did you just like attach it?
No, my blog goes somewhere else, but
Okay.
yeah, I do maintain that site for publishing offer. Yes.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a lot of work too.
It is. It is. It's all a matter of figuring out which tools and using the tools is what I do.
Yeah. Is there a book that you're wanting to write that you haven't written yet?
I have a proposal in the works. I haven't shopped it or really finished it to get it out there, but yeah, I think I still have some more that I want to write. That's for sure.
Are you sticking with the nonfiction genre or children's book?
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with nonfiction. That's really what my expertise is through the years. That's for sure.
Hmm. That's amazing. Have you been able to work with like companies, like you had mentioned, libraries? Have you been able to work with other companies like that to promote your book, like in a school setting or in a workshop setting?
I've done it in a workshop setting. I haven't really tapped the school market particularly, but there's there's more work to be done.
Cool. Um, let's see. I want to also tap into some of your questions as well, because you provided so many good questions. And I think that's what some people don't realize as well is that marketing technique, being able to not only give me information about your stuff, but also questions that you like to be asked. Um, as an editor, what is one of the biggest errors authors have on their expectations for their book?
Yeah, I think the biggest error is their unrealistic expectation. I don't care how you're going to publish your book. They all think that their book is going to be successful. It's going to sell. It's going to make a lot of money, whether they do anything or not. that's probably the that's probably the biggest error, because it's really the author's activity that sells the book at the end of the day. Your publisher has to do their part. Don't get me wrong. Your publisher has to get the book out there into the market, and it has to be available. But you, as the author, are the person that really drives people into the bookstore and gets them to buy that book at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and that ties back into everything we've been talking about. It's almost more work after you've written the book than it is to write the book, I think.
It is. It is. It's definitely a continual process. And one of the things that I really like about what we do at Morgan James is we're working with people like you over the long haul. A lot of these publishers will give you 3 months or 6 months, and then you can't get anything else out of them. Where we're still trying to help people like you that came to us several years ago to get your book out there and sell books at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think it's a great program, and to be able to say, you know, my book, you can buy it at Barnes and Noble, you know, on their website and things like that. It almost is mind-boggling to be able to say that, honestly.
Yeah, people can get your book at Target.com. That's what you can tell them.
Yeah, I think that's crazy, but again, that's just one of the great tools of technology to be able to say, like, oh, it's across any internet platform, anywhere you get books, you can buy it that way.
That's right.
Are you finding that ebooks sell better than physical copies, or are physical copies more the way to go?
You know, at the end of the day, they've done surveys, and it's really 80% print and 20% ebook. Everybody thought ebooks were going to take over the world when they came out, but that didn't happen. People really prefer print at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think there's something about holding that book in your hand and turning the page that just can't be replicated digitally.
That's right.
Why does the author have the greatest passion for their book?
Well, like at Morgan James, for example, we're publishing around 150 books a year. We care about your book. We are marketing your book, but our passion is divided because of all these other books that we're working on, where you as the author have one book. So you really need to take that passion and move that forward so that uh, you're working with small groups and bookstores and people that come across your path. Be telling them about the book.
What is the biggest takeaway that you are wanting people to experience from the 10 myths about, or 10 publishing myths?
I guess the biggest takeaway is that uh, people need to take practical actions to be getting your book out there into the market. So if I meet authors all the time that'll say, I don't have a newsletter. Well, if you don't have a newsletter, start one, because you should be reaching your readers out there with your material. So do that on a regular basis. So take those practical actions and just keep chipping away at it till you get it out there and get it done.
To come up with those myth busting actions, I think you called them in your book.
Uh, they were just the practical step by step thing that the author could actually do related to busting that particular myth.
And those myths, I'm guessing you've just seen them as an editor over time.
Yeah, that's where they came out, was from hearing these different authors tell me this information over and over.
I think that's a great quality that you have as an author, is to be able to also be an editor and say, like, oh, well, I know what works and I know what doesn't work.
Well, I'm still learning about all this, and I think that's another quality that people need to do, is to have that continual curiosity and be still keep learning about your craft and different ways to do this. There's not, like I said earlier, there's not a 1, 2, 3 formula. We just have to figure out our own way to get our book out there at the end of the day.
To the end of our time, and this has been such a great conversation. I've loved catching up with you, and I am so excited about this new book you have coming out. Is there anything you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
Well, I just encourage your listeners to go to publishing offer, check that out. I think it's unusual that you can get this book, including the postage, for only $10, along with over $200 worth of bonuses. But uh, take the action that you need to take as an author to be able to get your book out there, no matter how you're published. And that'll pay off for you in the long run.
Great advice. Well, thank you so much, Terry. I'm sure we will talk again.
Thank you, Morgan. Appreciate the opportunity.